This episode of The Therapy Show is sponsored by Therapy Notes. Why not find out what more than 100,000 mental health professionals already know and try Therapy Notes for 2 months absolutely free? Just click on the link in the show notes or enter promo code LISA at therapynotes.com. Welcome to the Therapy Show podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard. In each episode, I interview a seasoned and knowledgeable talk therapist from the counseling world to glean valuable insights, techniques, and tools that you can apply to your practice and your life. And if you're considering a career in the counseling field or just want to hear about what it's like to be a talk therapist, then this is the podcast for you. Well, hey friends, welcome back to another episode of The Therapy Show. This week, I have my friend, Steve Bisson, licensed mental health counselor on the podcast. Steve is in private practice up in Massachusetts, and he's also the creator and host of a podcast called Finding Your Way Through Therapy. And he recently just wrote a book. We're going to talk all about the things that he's doing right now in his world, as well as talk about what is good therapy or what makes for good therapy. So this episode is really just a conversation that Steve and I had, something that we just decided that we wanted to talk about and share with you all. We hope you find it interesting. We hope you find it valuable. And we hope that maybe it helps you understand what is good therapy. But before we hear from Steve, I want to ask you a question. Are you looking for continuing education contact hours? And do you want to learn while you're on the go or on the move? Because for a limited time, you can grab 15 NBCC approved contact hours for just $30. And you can explore the offerings over at my site, which is lisamustard.com/podcourses. I want to encourage you to go ahead and buy that pod course bundle today and enjoy any future episodes that I will be creating. I'll add it to your bundle at zero extra charge, because you want to go ahead and buy it soon, because that price is set to rise in September. And I'm in the process of recording and crafting more pod courses for you this fall. So hop on that opportunity today. And if you're curious about pod courses, so imagine a podcast blended with a self-study course. You can listen at your convenience, which could be in the car, while you're making dinner, doing laundry, at the gym, on a walk, wherever, whenever. And when you're set, you can take the brief quiz, finish the pod course evaluation assessment, and then claim your certificate of completion. It's really simple and easy. Any questions that you have probably can be answered over on my website, which is lisamustard.com/podcourses. One more thing before we jump into this interview. It is important to stress that these episodes are not meant to take the place of any work that you're doing with your therapist or doctor. In fact, please run these ideas by your counselor or doctor before you act on them to make sure that you are ready for them or even a fit for the suggestions, because I can't stress enough that each person is unique and their situation is unique. So please talk to your doctor before starting anything new that we might be suggesting on the podcast. And the Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard and the information provided by me and my guests is solely intended for informational and entertainment purposes and is not a substitute for advice, diagnosis, or treatment regarding medical or mental health conditions. Although I am a licensed therapist, the views expressed on the site, on my podcast, or any related content should not be taken for medical or psychiatric advice. Please always consult with your physician before making any decisions related to your physical or mental health. All right, let's jump into this episode with Steve. Welcome back to the podcast, Steve Bisson. It is just great to have you. Thanks for joining me today.
Always a pleasure. Always enjoy talking to you, Lisa.
Well, thanks. Well, tell everybody what you've been up to the past couple months.
My God, what have I not been up to?
Yeah.
I continue my podcast, Finding Your Way Through Therapy, on the PsychCraft Network, just like you.
Yep.
Really enjoy still doing the podcast, so that's a good thing. Still seeing clients in my private practice and enjoying that. I just started an endeavor with a friend of mine, group practice, and our aim is a little different. We're going to make sure that it has a great space for clients, but more importantly, we really want to give space for staff to be happy and healthy in the work environment we create.
Cool.
And I think that's something that has not been really examined by anyone. So, Gambit Counseling will be aiming for that and making sure staff is as happy as we can make them, because it's a stressful job. And I think we forget about that part.
That's really cool. I love that idea and that concept. So what's the name of the group? going to be?
Gambit
Gambit.
counseling.
Okay.
Just like the chess and gambit, and
Uh-huh.
people say, oh, if they don't, like someone said, oh, someone might not get it. I'm like, if they don't get it, that's fine. They're not going, well, I'm not going with that. I don't understand that. They're like, no,
Right.
they have openings and they have a good message. So
Yeah.
uh
So it's going to be in person?
no, all
Oh,
virtual,
virtual. Oh, very cool.
completely virtual.
Okay.
We figured also that would be something that on long term we're able to translate to other things, and
Hmm.
including coaching, because counseling is not just counseling, it's also coaching, because at one point you do better, so maybe you need
Hmm.
more coaching. So
That's
that's
cool.
something I've been working on with my colleague of mine, Bill Dwinell. So
Hmm.
we're working on that, and I created a journal. So
Sweet. Let's see it.
a journal, let's
Show
see.
it to everybody. Because if you're
Let's see.
listening, you can go and watch us over on YouTube. So there you are. Okay. Empower your mind, the 30-day journey to mental clarity. I like it. That's
So
nice.
one of the things about good therapy is to also be able to do things outside of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And
Definitely.
one of my biggest concerns for my clients is, how do I start journaling?
Mm-hmm.
And what this is a 30-day journal. There's different prompts. There's not 30 prompts, there's about 26. I repeat one. There's a reason for that. And it's a prompt with a follow-up question. And
Okay.
hopefully after 30 days, not only have you gained mental clarity, but you're also able to say, wow, I can continue that on my own afterwards. Or you can buy 14 of these journals and use it for that. I mean, I'm fine with that either way.
Right.
But it's just to help people, because journaling is, people see it as such a very mysterious thing.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I just want to demystify as much as I can. And it's good therapy outside of therapy to do. So that's why I did that.
I like that. And so where can we find your journal?
Right now is on Amazon,
Okay.
and singularly on Amazon, because I haven't explored anything. It was just an idea I had, and it blossomed very quickly. When the things that I told myself, like, do I have to read it and all that? And I'm like, no, good music sometimes are the ones who said, oh, I wrote it in 15 minutes.
There you go.
I didn't
Right.
quite write it in 15 minutes, but nonetheless, it was a quick idea, came up with the idea, and I'm hoping that it takes off. So,
Nice. So we'll put the link in the show notes if you guys want to go and check out the journal, because Amazon, you just got to add to cart
right.
and have it sent. I like it. Very
So yeah,
cool.
very hopefully people will enjoy it and learn how to journal, because that's, I think that part of my journey into mental health as a therapist and
Hmm.
as a client is to journal and talk about my thoughts, because I think
Hmm.
it's not, I spend this morning is interesting. I had my therapist at 10, and that he's like, oh, so you've been working outside of here. I'm like, you damn right I have, because therapy is not just the 50 minutes that I have with you. So that's good
Right.
therapy too. So
Oh yeah, I love that. That's kind of because over the years I've been to therapy, I've been to life coaches, and it's what you discover in the 50-minute session, that it's not just like thinking, we can't just somebody just said recently, like I think it was my interview, I think it was Avram Weiss said, we can't just think our way in therapy. We have to actually get out and like do and take action, because that's where I believe real change happens, is through having an experience, and always being kind of like self-aware and introspective about like what was that experience just like? What did I think? What did I feel? What did I take away from it? What stunted me? What was an obstacle? It's like always processing. But yeah, that 50 minutes that you spend with your therapist, to me is like a discovery
right.
time, where you kind of kick around some ideas. Your therapist is curious about you. Through collaborative work, you come up with what might be going on. So, yeah. And I know we wanted to talk about like what is or what makes good therapy, but I also just like catching up with you and, chatting with you. You are definitely, I know, have helped me open up more as a podcaster and share more of my story and be a little bit more vulnerable and authentic. So I have to give you major props for kind of spurring me into taking risks on the podcast and trying and doing new things. So thank you, sir, for being that inspiration. I appreciate it.
And you're welcome, and anytime. And I think that that's what real growth comes from too. You
Mhm.
talk about good therapy. We do great talks. What I love, I listen to your podcast, that, and I've listened for a while. You inspired me to go into podcasting, and so we're a mutual admiration society
Right.
here. But
Exactly.
I think it's the same thing. Like you will hear something on Lisa's podcast and or my podcast or whatever.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter to me. But don't just say, "Oh, that was good," and then move on.
Right.
Use it. Go
Right.
go get Lisa's stuff that she has. I have a book. I have also a journal. use those resources. And even if you decide that, maybe it's someone else, that's fine too.
Mhm.
But good therapy comes from, like, I don't sit there and say, let's promote Steve's book or Lisa's podcast. I'm like, wow, this person really could benefit from Debbie Ford's writings or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. But good therapy is not just strictly that 50 minutes, but it's also what you do outside of, whether it's podcasting, whether it's reading a book. I mean, it's important to continue to explore. You got to be critical of ourselves outside of that 50 minutes of therapy.
Definitely. Yeah, and it's one of those things that you have to live it, You can't just talk about it or think about it. But yeah, I was thinking, and when I first reached out and said, "Hey, would you want to come back on the show? I really want to talk about what is good therapy." A few months back I did one on like what is a who or what makes a good therapist. But kind of thinking back to that episode, it's like, well, how do you okay, finding a good therapist is one thing, but then how do you know if it's good therapy? How do you know if what you're receiving and getting is like good? Do you have a way to kind of frame that?
One of the things that I check in with my clients on the first session and maybe a month in
Hmm.
is this still working for you? So you can
Right.
talk about a good therapist. Let's talk about good therapy. A good therapy is that you're still getting something after a month or 4 sessions, depending if you're not going in every week, that's fine. But being able to say, what are you getting out of this? Oh, you know what? I really have worked on my thought process, or, I've changed my behaviors, or I'm thinking about addiction in a different light, or I don't want to put the stuff on my spouse or what have you. So you're like, okay, so there's growth. So I think that good therapy brings that growth. I mean, it doesn't have to be immediate and everything changes, but
Hmm.
thinking about it outside of therapy is usually a good therapy thing to do. That would be the first indication for me,
Hmm.
because if you come to see me for 3 months and you go, I haven't put one thing in play. I don't think you're right. I think you're wrong. And then that's very bad therapy. Not like, and therapists are not everyone's cup of tea.
Hmm.
I tell you that as you know, I work with first responders and medical staff primarily. And the reason that what I always like to hear from my firefighters, my police officers, my nurses, and my doctors, they say, Steve, you're just real. You're just you. So I really respond to that. And I said, yes, that's called the therapeutic relationship. And
Hmm.
for me, that's the other part about good therapy, is that it's not that Lisa is better than me or I'm better than Lisa. I'm no better than any therapist out there, frankly. At the same time, I also have a better relationship with first responders,
Yeah.
perhaps maybe medical staff. Why? Because of the therapeutic relationship. I'm not, as one firefighter put it one day, you don't look like a therapist. And I'm like, oh, so if that's what makes it easier for you, then hey, let's run with that. But I think
Right.
that's part of the therapeutic relationship. And I think that's a
Yeah.
big part of good therapy.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is really important is that relationship. And I mean, there's definitely I've had clients where we were not good fits. And I'm not, thinking over the years, it's like I think you would probably respond better to a male therapist, just based on kind of like how it's going so far. And then vice versa. Like I've had male therapists refer me, women 35 plus, um, as clients. So I think it's all about how are you connecting with the therapist. Also, too, I know we're speaking from like the therapist perspective on what makes good therapy, but what do you think from the client's perspective? Like, a lot of people are scared to come, they're worried, they're fearful about being judged. I've been doing this for so long that I kind of forget that like those people out there have those thoughts and those feelings. Like I forget that some people are really nervous about coming because it's like it's the world that I work in and that I live in, and I'm always like talking about it. I feel like it with, friends or family, just kind of like encouraging people to talk about things. So I know that they are out there. Have you encountered that recently where, you've had maybe some clients that it took them years to get to you?
Every time I have a new client, it feels
Hmm.
like it's been years.
Hmm.
Um, I think that what you talk about, the vulnerability in therapy, I think that's the part that I also explain. Like, one of the lines that I use when I feel like people are not being healthy or they're not getting anything out of this. And I say, okay, do you think this is working? Which is always an important question to ask.
Hmm.
And I also say, and if it's not working, remember, you're not wasting my time, you're wasting yours, which is even more valuable.
Sure. Right.
And I put it on the client, because if we always put it on the therapist to call it out, I
Hmm.
think that's unfair, because the client might have their own feelings.
Right.
no, I just don't want to open to anyone. And I realize that with my trauma, working with a guy is not helpful. I'm a woman or identify as a woman.
Mhm.
So I need to go with, a woman I feel I'm more comfortable with. Perfect. Let's do that. Why didn't she tell me? I was scared that I was doing it wrong. When there's no wrong way of doing therapy. There's just, being able to read your own cues. And, I talk about body stuff. Like if you come into a session, you're anxious, probably something you need to pay attention to. So that's the
Mm.
other thing too, is if you're coming in, I have a friend of mine who went in therapy for the first time, and I just had a bad feeling with this person. Then say that and then go find another therapist. Even though there's a shortage, and we all know that there's a shortage of therapists, trust your gut as a client. And being uncomfortable is not necessarily a sign of not good therapy, because I'm uncomfortable with my therapist. I can tell
Mm.
you that much. And
Right.
I love my therapist, but
Right.
it's being uncomfortable and not wanting to talk about stuff. Now, that's something you need to be very mindful as a client,
Right.
that maybe that's not good therapy for you, and be mindful of that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's, of course, it's like it's so nuanced and it's like a case by case situation because being uncomfortable doesn't necessarily mean it's not the right fit. It just means like what's going on in that moment that you're uncomfortable. So it's being aware and like kind of checking in with yourself. But for some people, yeah, if it's like they're uncomfortable, it's too much, they get flooded, they're out. Like and they've tried, it always comes down to like a case by case. And it's always everybody's got a unique experience, everybody's unique to the process. Yeah, so I agree with you for sure. It's an interesting way of explaining like being comfortable or uncomfortable, you know.
being able to have
Mhm.
that conversation about shame.
Mhm.
I think that for me, shame is probably one of the most powerful emotions that most people have.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
are you not talking about it because of shame, because it's hard for you to talk about, or is it because you don't want to talk to me about it? And
Right.
sometimes that's important to kind of put it out there, because again, this is not about, I have clients who send me memes all the time about I won therapy. You're never going to win therapy. You just never win. But if you feel comfortable enough, that's great, because that shame may bring you to a different place in your mind. But
Mhm.
if that shame keeps you stuck, then be
Mhm.
mindful of that. That's okay. We're all have, if you don't have an embarrassing moment in your life, I want to meet you.
Right.
I don't know who you are, but please, I want to meet you. But number two, talk about it. And
Mhm.
if it's something too difficult to talk about because you're not comfortable with that person in front of you, then that's a good sign of bad therapy, so to speak. Not a bad therapist, not a bad client, bad therapy. That means the therapeutic alliance is not there.
Mhm.
And the other thing that I wanted to also mention is that I've been in therapy for many years now, so I don't care. Like my new therapist, he's been with me now a year and a half. Um, he went bang right into it, but I'm used to therapy, so I knew what he was doing. So I'm like, go for it. Not as not a therapist, but as a client, I knew what he was doing. So I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, let's go.
Right.
But if a therapist you feel is too blunt, too hard, or it's not comfortable,
Mhm.
again, that's not maybe a sign of a bad therapist, probably bad therapy for you.
Mhm.
And I think that when you talk about good therapy, it's also good to pay attention to bad therapy and see what that means to you.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it just reminded me of when you said something, I don't know exactly what it was, but having that conversation with the therapist about, you know, I think so many people are just so used to ghosting or like not giving feedback or for whatever reason, they just don't want to get into it. I mean, there's certain things like I don't have the energy or the patience or the time to get into certain things that maybe bother me, but I'm like, okay, but I understand why I choose not to engage in that. But when it comes to that, the idea of going to somebody and like wanting to get help on, your emotional health and it's you don't like it or you feel uncomfortable, it's important to have that conversation with that therapist because that's part of the issue. That's part of the problem. The problem is not the problem, right? Like,
Right.
do you remember doing that in grad school? Like, the problem
Yes.
is the thinking, or the problem is the behavior, or the problem is not, the problem is the thinking, or the problem, so it's,
Or the past or
or the
whatever.
problem is the process, right? Did
Right.
you ever have that one? Yeah. Gosh, there's so much to mental health and to therapy, and it's fascinating when I think about like this work and this field, and just where we are today. And it's just like you said, there's a shortage of therapists. I mean, where I am in South Carolina, I feel like everybody on a corner is a therapist. I feel like there's so many therapists, and I guess maybe it's because of there's a university here that has like 4 different programs. There's always like an intern that's looking to take somebody on. There's always like the counseling center, free services to the community. Mental health is really big. But I haven't, honestly, personally, haven't tried to get a therapist recently. So I don't know what that process is like right now. Like if I wanted to use my health insurance and I was looking for a therapist and I was kind of going through the directory, I'm probably more apt to like talk to a friend first and say, who do you know that specializes in this, right? But not everybody has a pool of therapist friends that they can turn to. So how do you suggest that somebody who's out there looking make a decision? Like it seems so simple. Go to Psychology Today, type in your zip code, type in your insurance,
Yeah.
and then start filtering through. But is it ever that easy? I don't know. Is it?
Well, let's get back to maybe the basics of therapy to
Mhm.
give an idea. What I went in for therapy originally is not even close to the stuff that I'm talking about today.
Right. Yeah.
So sometimes what we do is we think we know what we need. One of my biggest pet peeves is that, oh, you need CBT, call Stevie does CBT. Well, cognitive behavioral therapy, it is great, but it may not be what the person is. Person comes in and says, I know what I told my doctor, but really it's because when I had this trauma, and I don't want to trigger anyone. I want to just keep it vague here for purposes of a podcast.
Mhm.
Oh, well, you know what? I'm truly not equipped for that. That's not my specialty, but Lisa can do it. So when you look for a therapist, think about, you can think about what the problem is and maybe try to identify that. But remember that you also might go in therapy and you may want to address your relationship with your blank parent from the past.
Mhm.
But ultimately, if you're not able to manage your life right now, you don't need a psychoanalytic therapist, but rather some more of a here and now DBT, CBT,
Mhm.
stuff like that to get you going right now.
Right.
And then maybe you get a psychoanalytic therapist.
Right.
Ultimately, it's feeling, go to Psychology Today. I mean, I know I don't know about you, and we've had this private conversation, but I'll put it out there. I get at least once or twice a week. Hey, Steve, do you know a therapist for blankety blank?
Mhm.
Well, I can tell you who has openings.
Right.
I can tell you, or you can look at Psychology Today and figure it out because not everyone's a cup of tea. Sometimes it's also going with your gut instinct in regards to that
Right.
and not realize like there's so many people out there that have different styles, different ways. I'm a person who is, hard on my sleeve, just going to say what I'm going to say. And that's not everyone's cup of tea, and that's fine.
Mhm.
But that's not written on my bio. The hard on
Right.
this because that's not going to sell so much. But it's being able to identify maybe one, two, or three therapists and then look for them and see what you feel is like even having that 15-minute consult. I don't know if that's common down there, but a lot of my
Mhm.
therapist friends, including myself, I'll be like, hey, let's talk for 10 minutes, see where we're going.
Right.
And sometimes like I've had someone come in and say, oh, I want to work on my relationship with my partner.
Mhm.
Turns out, well, there's historically a lot of trauma and physical violence in relationships. And it was with, a woman, they feel comfortable talking to a man because that's not helpful to talk to a woman. I'm like, okay, that's a good fit. That's great. But maybe if you've had violence with a man and I'm a man who has
Mhm.
a goatee and a shaved head, and I know preconceived notions are preconceived notions, but hey, it is what it is, right? We can pretend it don't exist, but they do. And so, oh yeah, my ex had a shaved head. Like maybe I'm not your guy, maybe it's
Right.
something else. But call, especially the ones who say free 15-minute consult, those are
Mhm.
the best ones to talk to because they may be able to identify what you need,
Mhm.
or they may be able to say, I'm not, this is a great fit, or it's not a great fit. So I think that part of me is not only going to Psychology Today, but finding people who are willing to consult. Because if I just say, come into my office, I mean, for my firefighters, my police officers, my medical staff, EMTs, paramedics, I usually come from a referral from like someone else from, the IAFF or whatever. So I come in with vested
Right.
knowledge.
Right.
But sometimes if you're just looking for a therapist and you're not coming from a referral source like that, find the ones with a 15-minute conversation, 15-minute consult with them because they
Mhm.
may not be what, it says here that I'm very specialized in psychoanalytic theory. And they say, okay, well, I'd like to do a little bit of shadow work. And they look at you, go, I don't know what that is. well, then that's not your therapist. I mean, I know shadow work, but
Right.
to say that I'm a specialist in
Right.
shadow work,
Right.
I'm not a shadow work guy.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to maybe look at who offers a free consult and talk to them.
Hmm.
Don't, it's not the good news is that, especially if you're saying down there's a lot of openings for different people who are available,
Hmm.
then, as they say in business, don't take your first offer.
Right.
Go and explore what's going to be best for you, because
Hmm.
I don't know what's best for you, and I'm pretty trained in that. Lisa doesn't know what's best for you, and she's pretty trained in that.
Hmm.
You will know what's best for you.
Right.
And that's important to kind of like explore that with a therapist prior to engaging it, in a session or 6 sessions or 6 months or 12
Mhm.
weeks or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter to me, but just being able to, engage is important to get that 15-minute consult. So maybe that's a good way to look at it.
Try Therapy Notes, the #1 rated electronic health record system available today. With live telephone support 7 days a week, it's clear why Therapy Notes is rated 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and Google. Therapy Notes makes billing, scheduling, note taking, and telehealth incredibly easy. And now, for all you prescribers out there, Therapy Notes is proudly introducing ePrescribe. And if you're coming from another electronic health record, Therapy Notes makes the transition quite simple, importing your demographic data free of charge so you can get going right away. So why not find out what more than 100,000 mental health professionals already know and try Therapy Notes for 2 months absolutely free. Just click on the link in the show notes or enter the promo code Lisa at therapynotes.com. Try it today with no strings attached and see why everyone is switching to Therapy Notes. Yeah, no, that's good advice. I like that. If I was, going to get back into it right now, that's what I would want to do if I didn't have a personal recommendation from somebody. Yeah, I like that. I think that's really good. And I think back over the years to the different therapists that I've had and like how different they all were, and how unique and the different skills that they bring to the sessions. It's really, really fascinating, like to think about it and who jives well with me or who I jive well with is it's pretty fascinating that this is like a job, like we sit and we talk with people and we listen, like people ask me all the time, like, what do you do? I listen really hard. I just listen, I listen, I listen. And I'm listening for new, I'm kind of like listening for, I don't know how to even describe it, but like whatever they come in with, and they want to, kick around and they'll start to kind of share. And I hear like, oh, I just heard, you just mentioned that event that happened with your partner. How did that, how did you feel after you had that conversation? I think people like think it's such a mystery what we do, but it's just kind of asking questions. It's kind of kicking ideas around. It's probing for more information. It's asking about. I mean, really, I'm a systems person, a family systems person. So I'm usually going to ask a lot about how they grew up and family of origin, and what was it like? What would your father say? What would your mother say? Like if your dad was here, like that kind of stuff, and then we would explore like the stuff that came out of that. So yeah, it's just different orientations, different models, different ways of doing it. But at the end of the day, it's about that relationship that you have, and that's where the new the because we say if going to therapy, the process or the new experience is the way through. You're doing that with a new like a person sitting in front of you. That is what therapy is. It's having that experience with a person who listens to you, who doesn't judge you, who says your thoughts and feelings and actions are valid, and what is it, unconditional positive regard, right?
Right.
So it's like that's what therapy is. It's having that experience with somebody and sitting with them and having all those things happen, and you're holding up a mirror to your client and you're saying this is what I see going on. I know it's sometimes it's like really hard to put into words what we do, and then sometimes it's like, oh, it's easy. I don't know.
Well, it's something that I sometimes realize is that there's times where for some clients, maybe newer clients, I'll kind of rehearse what I'm going to say next to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's clients that I've known for 5, 6 years. We don't see each other like every week, but we've known them for a long time. I blurt it out.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And it's circumstantial too. Like
Mhm.
if someone's going through a hard time with their relationship with their mom, for example, maybe me blurting out when they have an impulsive mom is probably not very well thought. So, as much as sometimes it's hard to put in words what we do, it's also hard to say what we do all the time, because if I've had a problem with a woman named Lisa, and then I'm talking to you as my therapist, and you say something, oh, you're against, and yeah, and I'm going to
Mhm.
start reacting to that. Then you got to be careful. Like, oh, I know you've had a lot of hard relationships with women named Lisa. I haven't, for the record, for anyone who's listening. It's not at all true for me. I'm just giving an example.
Right. I gotcha.
But like, I know it's hard to hear that from a woman called Lisa, but can I give
Mhm.
you some honest feedback? And
Mhm.
then just changing that wording makes it so much more palpable.
Yeah.
The hardest part of our job is to explain that we need to react to the situation sometimes versus everything else. I
Mhm.
rarely have I have verbal diarrhea apparently here, but on podcasts. But in therapy, I'm usually a guy who will wait for the questions. And
Yeah.
today I went on for like 10, 15 minutes. And at one point, my therapist says, okay, stop. Before we plan your next 20 years of your life, how about we talk about a little bit of the crap you just gave me?
Right?
And I'm like, ooh, okay, yeah, you needed to
Yeah.
stop me there, and you stopped me suddenly, and it was helpful. And I'm not I like to talk therapy. So what he does with me is body scans. And I'm like, oh, freaking body scan. But guess what? It freaking worked.
Yeah.
So it's important to like realize that our job, I wish it would be easy enough to just listen.
Yeah.
But as I remind people, is that it's just like physical health.
Mhm.
Cancer has what, I don't even know how many types of treatment. Heart disease has that many treatments. Diabetes has a lot of treatment. In therapy, for good therapy, is to realize that there are different approaches.
Mhm.
And when you do a family system versus a psychoanalytic versus a CBT versus a behavioralist, or people who do the second the medication,
Mhm.
and it's all good, but I as my clients sometimes go, like, "Do you think I should be taking, like, MDMA?" I'm like,
Mm.
"Okay, no." Well, it helped that person. Well, MDMA and historically is for people who have done all the treatments. You're
Mhm.
responding well to this, so you wanna
Right.
solve quick. Therapy,
Mhm.
unfortunately, does not solve quick.
Right.
And if someone says to me, "Well, medical does," I'm like, "Oh, yeah, because the first diabetes shot solves your pancreas right away." "Oh,
Mm.
wait a minute, it doesn't. It takes a long time." So it's the same thing with us.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's something that a lot of maybe even like in the work that I do now, there's a lot of I need to get fixed really quick, and I don't I need to do this because I want to do this and you need to tell me you need to sign this and say that I'm okay. I'm like, "Whoa, whoa." And how long did it take for you to get here? For all these symptoms were kind of like part of your life and now you want a quick fix um I think that's a kind of a I don't know if that's the myth of what we do in counseling, but it's that I think frustrates me a lot, but that's probably just kinda like where I am in the work that I do.
But I would argue with the work you do with,
Mhm.
nutrition and exercise,
Mhm.
people I want to lose 100 pounds
Oh,
in
yeah.
2 weeks. What? No,
Right.
that's just not possible. Well, I'm going to go get lipo. That doesn't solve your thought process. That
Right.
doesn't solve your eating habits. That doesn't
Yeah.
solve anything. They don't do that anymore. They
Yeah.
don't just give you that. You need to work through it.
Right. Right.
And there's no treatment that I know that takes only 30 days. As I
Right.
promote my book that says 30 days to journey to mental clarity. No,
Mhm.
this is to start you off so that
Mhm.
you can continue your mental
Right.
clarity.
Yeah.
I didn't offer a solution. I think that unfortunately we have this quick fix solution society.
Oh, yeah.
And yes, we can blame America, but I look at you, Canada, I look at you, Europe, and I look at you, Australia, Japan. We want things to be resolved right away.
Mm.
And it just doesn't work that way. And if I don't know about you, Lisa, but if this book literally saved your life in 30 days, I would give it away. Here you go. Everyone have one.
Sure.
I, I'll be fine. I'll figure out something. I'll
Mhm.
go do something else. There's just not one book. Like I joke around with my clients who are like, I just want to be fixed. I'm like, oh, I usually hide this from my clients, but let me look in this drawer. I think I have the fix for you in here. And they all laugh exactly like you just did.
That's
And they're
awesome.
like, "Oh yeah, I get it." And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's I think the problem is that people think they want the response right away. I've never fixed a human being in my life. I never will. I haven't even fixed myself,
Mhm.
and I'm still working on that.
Right.
So I tell people it's not about being fixed. It's about working through some of the stuff, because maybe your shame today has to do with shame when you first started working, or you were body shame, but now you're like being shamed for your thought process or whatever. It's not, I don't know everything about your life. You know everything about your life and you can't figure it out. How
Yeah.
do you expect me to figure that out in 2 seconds?
Right. Yeah. Makes sense. Makes total sense. Yeah, I know. It's just like maybe it's just the environment that I work in, working for the military. It's like they want what they want when they want it. And
Yeah,
I'm kind of like, that's just a frustration I have at times. It's easy for me to put that out there because I can complain about my job, or I can see it as, okay, well, if I know that I'm up against that, how do I explain it to them? How do I, set up a plan for this person? What does healthy look like for this person? So it's just like I like to kind of, I got to vent about something, Steve, right?
exactly. This is your venting show.
This is my
Uh,
podcast. Oh, no, just kidding.
But no, but I work with the other side of your
Hmm.
military, because they end up in first responder jobs
Hmm.
and stuff like that. And a lot of them come in and like, I just need to fix my relationship.
Right.
Your relationship of 5 years that has had some problems, you want me to fix that in 30 days. Uh, no, that's just not how that works. Uh, People who work in marketing, people who work in banks, whatever, it doesn't matter. They want that quick fix. It just doesn't work that way. I don't think it's just your profession. I think the military is a little more pronounced because they, and again, I'm overgeneralizing, so don't write to Lisa or me about this. They want 30 days, have a gun in their hand, and be able to be shipped out to XYZ to take care of business. And then I'd love to say that Lisa is able to do that. And I think that she does a fantastic job, or any human being who works in that field will do a fantastic job. I just don't think that that works that way.
Right. Yeah.
So, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I think I think that makes sense. I mean, it doesn't work like that in anything. I mean, even kind of taking it to when you and I kind of talk about like our podcast and like how it takes time to grow, and how it takes time to, get new listeners and get more downloads. It's like you and I both want it overnight, right? Because then that's just
yes,
what we want. But it's like it, that's not the case. Like we enjoy what we do. We like talking with people. We have curious minds. We love our profession, we love our peers, and we want to, give value. And you just wash, rinse, and repeat that enough times, it is going to grow, or it is going to increase. I was listening to a podcast today, and it's not talking about therapy, but the lady was saying like the rule number one is be consistent. Rule number two is be inconsistently consistent. Like, so if you have an idea or you have something that you want to start and you're going through a season of life where it's just not possible to be as consistent, like you and I were just talking, summer is just like crazy around here. And every summer I forget how crazy it is. And I just forget that, my schedule is going to be off. But I stayed inconsistently consistent as much as possible. And it worked for me. I'd like to have a better plan for next summer, but hopefully I will. I should learn from from this, right? But it's similar. Nothing happens overnight. Nothing happens overnight. Better relationships don't happen overnight. You don't lose the weight overnight. You don't magically cure your trauma overnight. Time takes time, takes time, takes time, and patience. And being willing to look at your stuff and kind of pivot when you need to, I guess. And I don't know. I feel like
and,
I'm just kind
and
of rambling right now, but
no, I don't think you are, because I think it's absolutely right. Therapy is consistently inconsistent
hmm.
and
Mm,
being consistent. You show up regularly. I tell people who come in weekly, I said, have 100% of my sessions been helpful to you all the time?
right.
And most people are like, and I'm like, no, no, don't, you're not going to break my heart. Go ahead. Now,
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like, you're not, you're off, or I'm off, or whatever. And I'm like, okay, great. That's absolutely true. Why can't you be that way outside of your life at other places, whether it's volleyball, soccer, taking care of the kids, taking care of the house, taking care of whatever? And then people are like, oh, that makes sense. I'm like, look, I'm not perfect. I know, like I say to people, I hit about 80%. I'd say 80% of my sessions are very good. 20% maybe I'm rambling, maybe I got off topic. Yeah, it just happens. And insurance companies who are listening to me right now understand that that's every human being, so I don't care. And my clients all laugh about it. And there's days where I've talked about I'm a hockey fan, so and police and firefighters in the northeast of the United States are usually hockey fans. And I've had sessions where we talked about hockey and maybe a little bit of the psychology of hockey. Like, I don't know if we accomplished anything. I said, yes, we increased our closeness because whether you don't like the Montreal Canadiens, which is my team, you're a Boston fan. It's okay. We joked around, we had a good relationship, and we can still bring that up in the next session.
Mhm.
That even though we don't agree, we can
Right.
work together. And
Right.
people are like, oh, that's great. So even at the most random stuff that I talk about with my clients, I always remind them that's part of the therapeutic process, and that's good because I talk about religion in therapy,
Mm.
and I practice Buddhism and the principles of Buddhism. And if you tell me about anything, about any type of religion, I am more than willing to talk about it. And people are like, oh, that's not therapy. And I'm like, how many people do you talk about your spiritual life or your religion?
Mhm.
Oh, I didn't think about it that way. That means there was a lot of vulnerability in this room, which is part of the therapeutic process. And
Mhm.
that means our therapeutic relationship is healthy because you were able to tell me, uh, and again, don't write me any letters. I don't believe in God. Or I believe in God, but he's after me or whatever. I'm just making it up here. But point being is that that's part of the therapeutic relationship, even though it's not therapy. And I can talk so much about David Burns and Aaron T. Beck and Sigmund Freud and all these great guys that I love. But at one point, I don't want to talk Marsha Linehan. I just don't. I just can't. And love her to death. I just can't.
Right. Right.
I love Gabor Mate. I love his book on the myth of normal. It's an
Yeah.
amazing book, but I can't talk about Gabor Mate every single session with people.
Right. Right. No, I totally hear you. Yeah, and I mean it's what people bring to therapy, and the kind of like where the conversation goes, and usually it is a helpful conversation. There are some sessions where you're like, I've had over the years, I've had clients kind of come and go, and a lot of times they just want to check in and let me know how their lives are going. And I think that's really special. Not so much that they have anything that they, really want to work on, but just kind of let me know that this is what I'm doing. This is what was happening. I think about this that you and I talked about years ago. And I think that's a sign of, this is a good therapy. This is good therapy. This is a good relationship that has been built here. I don't know. Sometimes there have been cases for me where it's hard to terminate therapy because I really like the client, and it's like, oh, I wish you weren't my client because I think we could be really great friends.
Right.
Those types of things too over the years. And I think the longer I've been doing this, the easier it is to kind of let that stuff go. But it is a sign for me that says, hey, I'm missing something in my life, maybe, like it's a
Right.
good, like, the word I'm looking for, parallel process, perhaps, that I'm needing something more in my life with friends or with acquaintances. I don't know. I'm just kind of like going off of our discussion here, but
But
yeah,
good
I mean,
therapy is for therapists too. I mean,
yeah. Mm,
honestly, we know, like, part of what, let's break a wall here for a second. Sometimes doing therapy with my clients opens up stuff that I need to address.
oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And if you're offended by that, by anybody listening to this, sorry, but that's the truth.
Hmm.
And one of the things that Lisa knows about me, and I know if you listen to my podcast or other stuff that I say, I always will be truthful.
Hmm.
And I joke around. I had a few clients say that, like, we could be friends. I mean, this is too bad. I'm like, okay, let's play that scenario out for a second. We go out for dinner, and then I start telling you about my problems, and they go, oh, no, no. And I'm like, exactly. So we're
Yeah.
not
Right.
friends.
Right.
We're
Yeah.
friendly. We have a
Right.
paid friendship, if you want to call
Right.
it that way. But yeah, you don't really, not that you don't want to hear about my problems, but the relationship is a lot more about you telling me about your stuff rather
Right.
than me telling you about my stuff.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that is spot on. Yeah, imagine. Oh, you wanna hear, let me tell you about what's going on in my life now. Like,
let me tell you about my partner for a second.
yeah. Did you hear? Oh my gosh, let me tell you about my husband and what he did yesterday. Tell me what you would do. What would you do? Yeah, it's fascinating what we do, and it's like, I don't know, it's a pretty wild job if you think about it. Pretty incredible.
I a good therapy too is for, we talk about good therapy. One of the things that I realize in time, and I've realized this for about 15 years, when you talk about, where we end up at the end of our lives, whatever that
Mm.
is, a lot of people regret not spending time with family or friends or giving more to charity or whatever. I'll never have that regret.
Mm.
And I know that no matter, even if it wasn't a good match, I was always honest with my clients and I gave them the right referrals if I needed to.
Hmm.
And to me, one of the things that a lot of people don't understand is that a good therapist will also listen and learn from you.
Hmm.
That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be like, oh yeah, please continue on that subject. I need to talk to my husband about that.
Hmm.
It's, like you learn from them. And one of my things that I do with all my clients that I terminate, you talked about good termination and good relationships.
Hmm.
When I terminate, I tell my clients, do you want to go for coffee or you want to go to a restaurant or whatever? It's on me, obviously. It's not therapy. We're just going to talk. And then we go out and I say, okay, this is where I tell you what you taught me in
Hmm.
therapy.
Hmm.
And most of my clients leave with that high of, oh,
Yeah.
so you did listen and you did learn. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know everything. What I
Right.
know is so little of life.
Right.
And you're teaching me about how difficult it is to have, to come out of the closet, for example, or, the white privilege that I have, or the male privilege that I have, or how, having a debilitating allergy to nuts and what that could do to you and how you've been scared of your, like, that's stuff that you brought me.
Hmm.
And people are like, wow, you really do listen and you learn from that. And I'm like, yeah, because that's part of good therapy too. A therapist who really listens actually gets a lot from the client too. And that would be another way to put it out there, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I really like that. Well, so this has been a really, different kind of episode that I've and I'm excited to have had you back on the show. Is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners about what you're doing or anything?
I said at the
Yeah.
beginning, and truthfully, if people can listen to Lisa, you listen to me on my podcast, that's great. But I truly believe that, what we do
Mm.
is amazing work, and what you can get from our podcast is important to take out not only of your car, but remind yourself of where you can practice that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's I can't think of any of my guests or your guests, Lisa, yet I
Mhm.
listen to my guests and yours. But there's always something that I can get. And sometimes I'll even write a note when I get into the house about what I heard over Lisa's podcast. Or if I'm talking to I have a book here where what my podcast guests have taught me.
Oh, that's
Remember
cool.
that don't take what you heard and go, that was a great, it entertained me for 40 minutes. And with all
Mhm.
due respect, we're not the Handmaid's Tales. We're not we actually are hoping you get something out of this. So if you want to look at podcasts as not only entertainment but something you can get out of,
Mhm.
I think Lisa's podcast, my podcast, a lot of the Psycraft Network podcasts are exactly that.
Yeah.
So bring that somewhere, because Lisa has a lot of great guests that really brought me to different views and really helped me. So, and again, because I want to say one of them, I can't think of any, but Lisa knows I write to her all the time about, oh, I listened to so and so and I heard this or I missed that or what have you. So please, if you, one message besides good therapy is to listen to podcasts and think about what's the one thing I can get out of this.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't help you in 2 weeks, then throw it out. It helps you for the next 2 years, then great. That means
Yeah.
what Lisa and said has really brought you. So I know I'm plugging your
Well,
podcast,
thanks
not
so
mine,
much. Wow.
but it's because I have a lot of respect for you, Lisa.
Oh,
And
thanks, Steve.
if a good
Mutual.
therapeutic relationships and good friendships are
Mhm.
sometimes similar. I don't think that when I first contacted you about getting on podcasts, we'd end up on the same network and be so close. But hey, here we are. So that's it's great stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty neat that I always say stay open to ideas and possibilities and opportunities. You just never know what is going to present itself. And I think that's something that I've learned over the years of, my own therapy as, try to stay open-minded, have an open heart. I mean, I could share so much what I've learned about myself over the years, but I won't do that at the end of this episode. I am curious though, what is something you're doing right now besides journaling that's been helpful for you with, like, any new habits or skills you've picked up recently that are helping you kinda, like, with your own emotional health?
I use for the last, I want to say, about year, I use something from the Atomic Habits book that I still
Mhm.
continue to use that is really helpful. We do a lot of things during the day, but sometimes when we go to bed at night, we go like, what did I really do? Well,
Mhm.
Atomic Habits talks about putting like marbles into a, like in and out, so to speak. And what I do is I'm on my third jar of marbles of things I've done in the last year. And the marbles, there's like, I had never counted them, but there's a lot of marbles in that thing. And it makes me feel like sometimes when there's days where I'm like, oh, God, what the hell did I do? And then I have my marbles right here that tells me what I've actually done. And it makes me realize that we do a lot more than we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah.
Because I think that, we don't realize that taking our kids to school and making a healthy lunch is two great accomplishments in a day. We're going to be like, oh, but I didn't finish the podcast, or I didn't do my full intro. No, I did a good lunch and I took my kids to school and I didn't rage. So that's all good stuff.
Right.
So
right. Yeah, no, I like that. And I think that in, today's culture and society, it's like we measure ourselves sometimes against what we see on social media, and we think, well, if I didn't do what they did today, then I'm not, quote unquote successful, however you would be defining success. So I think that's really important is, it sounds like you have defined a successful day by being a present father who is, your kids are one of your highest values. And I think that's pretty neat. Pretty cool. I like that. Very cool. Well, Steve, thank you so much for being here today. This has just been great. You guys go ahead and grab his book. The link will be, or his new journal. The link will be in the show notes if you want to listen to Steve's podcast. It's called Finding Your Way Through Therapy, and I'll put the link in the show notes as well. And definitely check out the other shows that are part of the Psychcraft Network. I know that they would love to have you find them, so I'll put a link in the show notes as well for you to check them out. So once again, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
The Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard is edited and engineered by Chelsea Weaver. If you're looking to start a podcast or ready to take the editing off of your plate, be sure to visit chelseaweaverpodcasting.com. Well, that wraps up another episode of The Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard. I know there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and I'm thankful you've chosen to listen to mine.
Be sure to visit lisamustard.com to access the show notes and discover more fantastic content.
And I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the show. Thank you.